Madam VA, I really appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you.
Well, it's a privilege to be here with you. Thank you.
How would you characterize crime in the metro area right now?
We're definitely seeing a spike in crime. The thing I think that's most concerning is that we see a lot of violent crime, which is the crime most of us are most nervous about. Too much gun violence and just is problematic.
What do you think is the driving force behind the spike we're seeing here in Metro Atlanta?
Well, I'm sure you know, if you follow me at all, that I think gangs are a huge problem in our area. I think for too long, politicians were not really wanting to say this nice southern city in Atlanta had a gang problem, but the reality is we are a major metropolitan city, and there are certainly factors that are caused by gangs. And it's not just the violence, it's everything from car break-ins to burglaries to human trafficking to shootings. So all spectrum of crime is being impacted by gang violence.
That is an important issue to you. It's clear to anybody who knows you or follows you. What is the DA's office doing about it, since you know that is such an issue?
We've done several things about it. One thing that we are doing is we've beefed up that unit in terms of just there's more lawyers, there's more investigators. We've now put jail call technicians that are focused on the calls that involve gang members. We've also done a nexus unit. When I say a nexus unit, I've put an ADA and an investigator that are looking at the cases that involve human trafficking and gangs. And so that's something that was never done before, but we started to see that that was a major problem. Another thing we're doing, and we're doing it very recently, is legislation. We're asking the legislators to make a move. And we're asking them to make a move in changing the way the laws are written. We've got a bill, 359, you may or may not be aware of it, but in that bill we ask that if there is a gang crime that occurs, and for the most part, most of that crime occurs right here in Fulton County, but there's some little piece of it that happens in DeKalb that's criminal in nature, and another little piece that happens in Cobb, maybe one in Gwinnett, but certainly the nexus of the organization and the criminal activity is right here in Fulton. The legislature, we're hoping, will see fit to allow us to not only prosecute all of these things here that happened, but also those little offshoots that happen in other counties. This wouldn't be something special to Fulton if the most of the gang activity happened in Gwinnett County, but there was an offshoot in DeKalb and an offshoot in Fulton and Cobb. They would be the ones that could prosecute that entire crime. That will allow prosecutors to tell juries the entire story. The criminals don't care that they crossed over a block and that this one thing that they did occurred in DeKalb and not in Gwinnett. And so it only makes common sense. So that's another thing that we're doing, is going to the legislature. I've also asked both the governor and I'm asking state representatives to include in that a request for gang prosecutors right here in Fulton County.
State funded?
State funded prosecutors. So not just the prosecutors we have that are county funded, but actually through the Prosecuting Attorneys Council and PAC and the state, that they fund gang prosecutors, because I think that that's very important. And let me be clear, not just prosecutors, but prosecutors and investigators. We've also started to work with the Atlanta Police Department, and I'm so happy for Mayor Dickens' leadership, because we are asking that the city of Atlanta get involved with us in our gang prosecutions, and that we literally have a prosecutor and an investigator that work specifically with that task force. And so on the fronts of gangs, we're trying to attack it from every angle.
You have suggested specific language in SB 359. How rare or how common is it for a district attorney to be that involved in some legislation?
Well, I can tell you the Prosecuting Attorneys Council is always very involved in legislation that they want to see go up. But this, as you know, is close to my heart. I think it's so important to combat gang violence. What we know is that a gangbanger who commits a crime is 6 times more likely to commit crime than any other defendant. We've got to stop this at the root. So I don't know that it's common, but it's necessary and it's needed. And I'm certainly not the first prosecutor to do it.
And correct me if I'm wrong, or if you will, provide some context on this, because in what I was reading, it looks like it also would allow you or the prosecutor to bring in past evidence of gang crimes, which really wasn't allowed before.
Well, it would help in that way, and not just in that area. This bill also would allow, if you have a repeat domestic violence offender, you would be allowed to bring in that information. If you have a repeat child abuser, so not sexual child offenses, because that is already allowed, but a repeat violence against criminal children. Also, if you have repeat elder abuse and special needs. And so it allows it in all of those arenas where you'd be able to tell the prior conduct if it was repetitive in those particular areas. So I think that is really, really important. That will be an amazing tool for a prosecutor. But more importantly, for the citizens that have to make those decisions, it will inform them about that this person has a propensity to commit acts of domestic violence. And so I think that that is very important.
They get a fuller picture.
A complete picture.
You know, Georgia already has one of the best gang statutes in the country, really. We're allowed to put our own gang charge out there. Many people would consider that a best practice. Why isn't that enough? Why do you think we need to go further?
Well, I think we should always be looking at ourselves and how to improve. And so you're right, Georgia does have a very good gang statute. We are certainly using it and encouraging law enforcement officers to use it. But the reality is, when you look at what we have going on, when you look at how criminal enterprises act and behave, this only makes common sense to be able to prosecute them fully for all of their crimes. And so it's not enough because it doesn't do this.
Do you think law enforcement agencies really are using it? I read a statistic in 2020, there were fewer than 1,000 warrants with that criminal gang activity charge. Do you think it's really being used to the extent that it could?
It's absolutely not being used to the extent that it could, but that is why I am so excited about the partnerships that this district attorney's office is having with our local jurisdictions. We've met with all of our police chiefs. They are all very welcoming. In fact, they are all very excited about training that this office will do with their officers so that they're comfortable using that, right? It's a new tool. All police officers are not like any other human beings. They are the same. We are all kind of you want to push back when you're being asked to do something new, but they are excited about the training. The agencies are very willing to do this, and I think that you will see, at least in this county, that is used more and more, and we're already seeing that.
I understand you even made some phone calls to law enforcement. Did you encourage them to do so?
We've had meetings and phone calls and sit downs, but they've all been very, very supportive, and they want to do this because what they understand that this helps with recidivism. That statistic I gave you is 6 times more likely. Those are real crimes that impact real citizens, and so they know if they can use these warrants, it helps us to be more successful in our prosecutions, which keeps very violent people out of their communities. And so they are anxious to be able to support us in this way. And so I agree with you. It is not being used as much as it should, not just in Fulton County. I would say nowhere in the state is it being used as much as it should or could be. But I think that Fulton County is always a leader. We sit here, we are the biggest jurisdiction, and I think that our practices will spill out into other communities and that officers will get comfortable using this tool.
When a certain jurisdiction starts getting really tough on gangs, it tends to just kind of move the gangs around the state to other areas that may not be quite as tough. Do you think your legislation and the suggested language that you're putting in there would help create a bigger crackdown statewide?
I do, actually, and one of the things that we've done since taking office last year is myself, along with all of the urban district attorneys, have joined together, and we have an organization called UDAC. And one of the things that we're looking at is we're looking at juvenile crimes, we're looking at effective diversion programs, but we're also very much looking at this issue of gangs. And so us as the lead elected prosecutors actually have each designated someone from our offices that deal with the issue of gangs, so that we can talk about best practices and using this particular statute 359 and gang warrants. And so I think that collectiveness of minds and bringing all of the urban district attorneys together, those are the largest jurisdictions with populations of 140,000 and more, and us all doing business the same way in this field, I think it's going to absolutely help statewide.
How much of Georgia's crime do you think is related to gang activity?
Too much, too much, more than we can even imagine, because it's all of the car thefts that we don't even know go back to the gangs. The GBI has said, upwards of 70 and even 90%. I think that may be a little high, but it is way too much of our gang activity. And the other thing that we have to talk about is it's stealing our youth from us, right? It's taking our juveniles and our children and getting them into a life of crime. It is so much better if that we are trying to snatch our children and put them into effective programming and positive things that they can do while being really tough on the older gang members so that they never steal our children. I'm really happy to say that myself and the United States Attorney, Kurt Erskine, when he was sitting in that position, did credible messengers together. And that was hitting some children that probably a lot of society would say, why are we going to be bothered with them? But that program was extremely effective. And if we can stay in children's lives doing positive things while never lifting up on how strong we are against gangs, I think it's going to be wonderful statewide.
There seems to be two schools of thought in how to handle crime. There's either the programs and rehabilitation or there's prosecution. It seems to fall on those two sides. How do you walk that line as district attorney, straddling that?
I would agree with you, and that's very, very frustrating to me, a very, very frustrating phenomenon. It's like you're either progressive or you're hard on crime. And what I would say is the best practice is you're both. I don't consider myself to be a tough on crime prosecutor or a progressive prosecutor. I consider myself to be both. If you commit a violent crime in Fulton County, Georgia, we are going to be extremely tough. Our sentence recommendations are going to be tough. Our investigations are going to be thorough, and we are going to completely prosecute you. And I don't lose any sleep about it because I think you need to be removed from our community. At the same time, I am a huge advocate for diversion programs to grab our children up and young adults who just make really silly decisions and make sure that we put them on a different path. So I think that this foolishness is really what it is, that you only can be one or the other is not correct. I think we have got to have a holistic approach to this picture and work with each other collaboratively. I'm excited to say I just met with the school superintendent of Fulton County, and we talked about all of the different services the school could put in place while still making sure guns are not brought into his schools. So you have got to have a holistic approach where you don't pretend like the problem is not there. Oh no, Atlanta doesn't have gangs. Yes, we do. We have to realize, yes, we do have gangs, and we're going to deal with the gang people that are doing very harmful, violent things. But we also have children that we don't want to see fall into gangs because they're deprived, because they don't have resources. We want to make sure that we put a lot of resources around them and get them to a positive start. Because if we do that, they're not going to be breaking into your car. They're not going to do harm to you. They're not going to be in the middle of a shootout that takes a 6-month-old baby from us if we can redirect that energy. And so we have a really strong reason and need to try to do both.
Admittedly, gang crimes and criminal gang activity is not talked about as much in the media or even in just general conversation, it seems. How would the public be able to pick out maybe what is gang activity from a crime that's reported on the news? What are some of the markers that would tell people this might have been gang activity?
Well, I think what they should do is be very vigilant in paying attention, very detailed in their descriptions of the way things happen, listening to the language that was said, maybe as people communicated with each other, because often you'll see those crimes committed by multiple people at the same time. They should be very specific in the details that they give to law enforcement. And then quite honestly, law enforcement is going to have to be very detailed about when they make arrests and what they see on perpetrators, because all of that gives you information about whether this crime did stem from gang activity.
Senate Bill 359 has 25 sponsors.
Isn't that fun?
That's a lot.
Yeah. That's exciting.
It is. It's exciting. And it also seems that all 25 are Republican. How does that make you feel?
It doesn't make me feel bad at all. I know we are in a society where we like to say Democrat, Republican, and all of this. This is what I have found out. And I wish people would really get away from all of these labeling that we do of each other. This is what I know. I can go to the richest community in my county and they don't want to see crime. I can go to the poorest community in my county and they do not want to see crime. I can go to the county with the most highest concentration of African American citizens and they don't want to see crime. I can go to the part of my county with the highest population of Caucasian Americans and they do not want to see crime. No one wants crime in their community. All of us want good schools for our children and for our children to be safe when they go to school, safe when they walk to school, safe when they walk home. There's no difference between us. We need to stop making these differentiations that are really based on Nothing. I talk to all of my constituency and they all tell me the same thing. They like police officers. They want to see police officers in their community. They do not want gangs in their community, and they do not want them or the people they love to be the victims of crime. So, I am hoping that some Democrats will get on that bill. I think that they will. I think that once they read it and understand it, that they will get involved with that bill. But I am happy to work with anyone who wants to help me in this fight against gang violence and crime.
Sounds like it's an everybody issue, not a
It is an everybody issue.
Why was this part, the legislation suggesting the specific language, why were these specific changes so important to you?
Because I think they help to tell juries full pictures. So at heart, I'm not the elected district attorney. I'm still a trial lawyer. And I know that when I talk to juries over the last 20 years, you talk to them, they are very smart. Lawyers that get frustrated with jurors, but the truth is they are very smart and they tell you what they need. And so they've been telling me for a long time what they need. And they don't want us to tell them half the picture. They know that everybody is human and that things happen, but they want to know the full picture of what's going on. And this bill is a way to give jurors what they want anyway.
Absolutely. What did not make it into the bill that you hoped would?
What I hope still will. It's those state-funded prosecutors. I think that it was really great, and I commend Governor Brian Kemp. Let me say that again, because I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican. I commend Governor Brian Kemp for giving the AG's office some gang prosecutors. I think that he has proposed that. I think that's a wonderful thing. Let me tell you who else I commend. I commend Lieutenant Governor Duncan for his effort to make sure that GCICs are properly updated. 2 Republicans, I commend them both today. That lets you know I don't care about that. What I care about is fighting crime. It is wonderful that he did that, but the AG's office is not large enough, doesn't have the budget enough, is not going to be able to hit every area of the state with gang prosecution. That's going to be my office and all of the local prosecutors. And so it is imperative that we get the resources we need. And so what I'm disappointed has not yet made it into the bill are prosecutors for state level gang issues. And investigators, I want to be very clear. I think that we need that. I think the state has a responsibility to provide it, and you can't look at what's going on and not know that. And so I'm hoping to see that submitted in this bill or the next one.
For every jurisdiction, every county, how many would you like?
I'm going to let the legislature do their job. I think that it should be depending on what you see. What do you see in the gang warrants? What do you see in the statistics about how much gang violence is plaguing them? There may be areas of the state where they're not really suffering from a gang problem. Although I have to tell you, I talk to my friends that represent rural jurisdictions, and they explain to me that they also are seeing gang problems. It may not be to the same degree, but they are seeing it. And so I would say that my brothers and sisters that represent the rural jurisdictions also need gang prosecutors. But it may be that, Fulton is bigger with more gang problems. Maybe we need more, and just per capita they need less. But they need to look at the amount of gang crime going on in a community and provide prosecutors and investigators to deal with those issues.
Would you classify it as a crisis at this point?
I think that we have a very serious issue, and you don't have to really rely on the district attorney in Fulton County. Just look at the crime numbers and look at the violence and look at how much of that is tied into gang issues, and it's a crisis.
I understand the bill is going in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee right about now, if it's going as planned. What do you expect to happen?
I expect for it to get passed, ultimately.
And how would that make you feel?
Elated. This is a job where some days you get wins and some days you get defeats. That would feel like a real win, not for me as the district attorney, but for our community and for our state.
Is there anything that is surprising, you think would surprise the public about criminal gang activity in our city or metro area?
I hope that as we talk to the media and as we really kind of take off the Band-Aid and the hiding behind this, that they're becoming more and more aware. I think that the community would be surprised, though, at their part in this. And so why do I say their part? Too many of great citizens are leaving guns in their cars. the guns that they're leaving in their cars are ending up in positions where they harm people. We need to stop that. I think they would be surprised to know that that little careless act of them causes harm sometimes somewhere else. I think that they would be surprised to know that our schools are suffering from guns being brought into their schools, and that is a real concern for teachers and educators, and that we have to get tough on that. I think that they would be surprised to know that the schools are actually seeing fights in their schools that they know stem from community and gang violence. So I think that some of us get to live in a bubble that we don't know that this is going on, but that is closer to your home than you think. And so you need to be aware and conscious and paying attention.
I read a statistic that said the majority of gang crime is committed by juveniles. Do you agree with that?
I agree with the majority of crime occurs between people probably about 13 and 25, so yes.
That's sad.
It's very sad. It's why we have got to put programming in, support our school system, and do the things we need to do to turn this around.
So what's your next step? Now that you've suggested this language, the legislature obviously has to take it from here, but is there anything that the public can do or that other people can do to support the legislative, support the bill or support you?
Absolutely. Please get involved. Please write your state legislatures and say you would like to see this bill passed. Please go and read when you can this bill so that you know exactly what we're asking for. But what I guess I would ask them to do most of all is call your state representatives. They work for you, just like I work for you. Call us and let us know that this is something that you want to see, that you think it's important, that as you sit on a jury, if somebody is a repeat domestic violence abuser or a repeat abuser, that's information you think would be helpful, and so you'd like to see this legislation get passed.
If a gang member happens to see this story and hears you, what would your message be directly to them?
So they need to make a change in the way that they're moving in their life, because we plan to prosecute you with all of the resources that we have, and that you are absolutely a target that we are trying to remove from our community.
The latest numbers I could find said about 70,000 gang members, but that seemed back from 2018. From 1,500 different gangs, have you seen any more recent numbers than that?
I have not, but I often look at those numbers frustrated knowing that they have not been updated, because I believe the problem has grown.
So you think there's a lot of underreported?
Absolutely. We know that not even every law enforcement department is reporting their numbers to GGI AAA, which keeps the numbers on gangs. So I do think that they're underreported.
What's the most frustrating part for you in combating crime at this moment in time?
Everybody says they want to be tough on crime, but when it's time to give the resources that are needed to our law enforcement officers, to district attorney's office, it's often not done. That is very frustrating. Do not stand in front of the camera and make it a slogan that you want to be tough on crime. When our police officers need resources, need training, need bulletproof vests, need guns, need all of the resources they need to be excellent, make sure that you participate in giving them those resources.
I think you're absolutely right that people are hearing a lot of talk, and it makes them skeptical that any idea is actually going to work. How would you convince somebody that this plan will actually make a dent in gang crime?
Well, I think it's all of it. It's a holistic approach, and I think that this plan in its totality will make a difference, because what we have been doing is not working. So it is time to do something new.
I so appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.